Hi, this is Matthew, creator of Forging Your Legend, where we help people turn their toughest battles into their greatest legends. Today, I want to share my story with you. For those of you who've been through something like what I've been through, you know that it's not all something you can put into a short video. So this is kind of the bullet point or highlight version. My health issues started when I was fairly small. I had tons of ear infections as a kid, enough to definitely make my parents wonder if I was going to have hearing loss. So for that, I had a lot of antibiotics, and that in turn wrecked my gut pretty early on. So as a kid, I dealt with a lot of colds that would stretch on for months sometimes and turn into bronchitis or pneumonia. And I was dealing with insomnia pretty early on. I was also dealing with the fallout from being a little empath who picked up everything from the people around me. I felt everybody's pain, and I think I wanted to heal it or transmute it, but nobody really wanted to hear the truth. Nobody wanted to hear what I saw in them, and they wanted to suppress. So I had to learn to suppress, shut down, split off, deny, become inauthentic. And that definitely set me up for problems down the line. But I was otherwise a pretty normal, if not even kind of over-the-top outgoing type of kid. I was in a lot of different activities as a kid and as a young teenager, just was living all out up until a certain point when health issues kind of took over. About age 12, I remember the first time I dealt with the feeling of being suicidal. That's when I kind of figured out that that was a thing. Just dawned on me one day. I know the depression was there before that, but this was when I really became aware of it. At about age 13, I started to have a chronic fight, flight, freeze response where I was just dealing with kind of a danger signal that wouldn't turn off. And it came too easily, even with things that weren't, anything to worry about, like maybe a chess tournament that I was playing in or something. And later that year, I also had a neck injury. I was leading a 4-H calf so that I could, train it to show at the fair. And my neck got jerked really, really bad, and I was in a neck brace for several weeks after that. And I don't think that injury ever fully healed, at least not for many years. When I was 15, I started to deal with pain in my wrists. And to give you some context about that, that was about the worst nightmare that I could have, because my greatest passion was playing the drums. I practiced probably anywhere from 8 to 15 hours a week, and they were just my heart and soul, my passion. I loved it. And so I went into the doctor, and of course, their response was, "Oh, it's probably just tendonitis. You'll be fine. Just take a couple weeks off." So I did that, and as you can probably guess, that didn't solve the problem. So unfortunately, I quit playing drums for a while. It broke my heart in a way that is hard to explain. And even though I've been through things 10 times worse in the years after that, in some ways that was uniquely awful, because it was the first moment I realized that you could be created for an amazing purpose that was just your love and your soul passion, and it could still be taken from you for no reason. And that broke something in me very early on. But fast forward to age 16, I found a modified way to play drums after about 9 months to a year of not playing. And I started a band, had a girlfriend, so some things were going well. But I was also put on antidepressants at that point, and that was something that would stick with me and I would have to take for many years after, unfortunately. The depression was getting worse. The fight or flight was getting worse. And to top that all off, the girl was an exchange student, unfortunately. And so after 9 months, she went home to South America, and it hit me pretty hard. A few months later, my lung collapsed, and they call that a spontaneous pneumothorax because medically they don't have a reason that happened. But I know what the reason was, and it was grief. A year later, I did get to go down to Chile and spent a summer as an exchange student in her town. But I also picked up a virus while I was down there. Left me really sick for a couple of weeks, and I think weakened me further. So I went back home and I finished high school, and my only focus really was get well so I can go down to Chile and work as an ESL teacher. I already had a job lined up. I was really passionate about learning Spanish even more than I already had, and continuing to play music and just live a great life. And I still had a lot of hope at that point. But unfortunately, despite all the doctoring I did, despite all the things I was trying, I just was slipping further down. And eventually my girlfriend gave up and found another guy. And I was in college part-time at the time. And I just kind of had a complete breakdown and quit college and gave up in a way. I kept going to doctors, I kept trying things, but I think I was very disconnected from reality after that point. At age 20, I was treating a diagnosis of chronic Lyme disease, and I was in a hyperbaric chamber doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and I had a seizure. This seizure was massive. I was gone for, maybe 3 or 4 hours, maybe even 5 hours. And I think it honestly should have killed me. But after waking up in the hospital, they gave me a spinal tap, and after a few hours they sent me home because they said, all right, well, I think you're gonna be okay. But my brain was never the same after that, not for probably 10 years. Something was very broken. The next year, I had my wisdom teeth pulled, and that dentist/oral surgeon was not a good guy on a lot of levels, but he managed to get my jaw infected, and to make matters worse, I knew it was infected, and it formed this pocket under my jaw here, and I tried to tell them, hey, this is infected, we need to get this removed. They ignored me, and ignored me, and ignored me, until it had hardened into this mass that was stuck to my jaw, and the infection had spread to my whole body and become basically chronic. Eventually, I found a doctor that listened to me and went in and cut open the pocket and removed it, and he hadn't even believed me that it was infected. He just said, all right, fine, I'll do it if you think so. And turns out it was infected, but by then it was too late. I had a lot of failed relationships at that point, a lot of PTSD causing incidents with that. I was very deeply disconnected from my power, from my core, from my masculine essence. I was emotionally stunted. I didn't know how to feel anger. I didn't know how to feel grief. I was just completely blocked off and dead in a lot of ways. Some of it was from the seizure. Some of it was just from learning very young to suppress myself and to be scared of my own power. But I guess the women I was with just couldn't trust me to be a provider and a leader, because I wasn't those things. But I'd seen every doctor and healer you could imagine by this point. Everybody from the Mayo Clinic to ayahuasca shamans. Those of you who've been on that kind of path know what I mean when I say you try anything. You're desperate and you try anything, because after years of it, you just start to think, well, whatever it takes. Maybe there's no way out, but I gotta try everything. And at 23, probably thanks to that infected pocket a couple years earlier, I had to quit singing. My singing voice was affected, and had to quit for about a year. And that was uniquely terrible because it was one of the only things I had left. I had to quit playing drums permanently by that point. I had to quit playing guitar. I had to give up on college. Been through a lot of loss. But singing was just in my heart and my soul. And so to not be able to sing was just, felt cruel. At that time I was dating a girl from San Diego, and she and I decided, hey, let's continue this in person. And so I decided I was going to go to college in San Diego, and I moved down there, but unfortunately shortly before I moved, we broke up. And what would come next was worse than I could have ever imagined. To give you the full picture, I had just gone through a breakup. I was moving to a new town that I didn't really know people in. I was trying to go to school for the full-time for the first time. And I was also going through withdrawal from antidepressants. And on top of all that, I got a toxic chemical and a toxic mold exposure. So I quickly deteriorated from semi-functional to just absolute neurological and mental breakdown. I was deeply exhausted, but I couldn't sleep anymore. My nervous system was on fire. I was so suicidal and depressed, I can't even explain it to you. Ended up just breaking down sobbing or even screaming every day because of the torture I was going through. I kept trying to go to school until I just couldn't do it anymore. I was still managing to get A's even when I couldn't see straight or hardly sit up, but eventually it just became too much. And it wasn't too long after that I became bedbound. And I stayed with some friends for a while, but eventually I had to move back in with my parents so that they could take care of me. That was the darkest period of my life. I had been already working for around 15 years at that point to try to get well, and I was sicker than ever. I cannot tell you how trapped and lost and abandoned I felt. Like God didn't care if he existed at all. The picture that I can paint for you of that is, it's incomplete at best because I was very disconnected from myself. I was deeply, deeply depersonalized, derealized, out of body. But the fatigue was one of the worst things about it. I no longer felt human because I couldn't feel myself anymore. And the fatigue was so bad that if I so much as lifted my arms above my head, that would be enough to knock me out sometimes, or even just going down the staircase was off limits for me much of the time. And if I did manage to do it, I had to plan it out. I was pissing into a jug, and when I had to poop, I would sometimes have to be helped to the bathroom even though it was only 15 feet away. I was in constant pain, dealing with scoliosis and spinal misalignments and digestive issues, and I was dealing with chronic inflammatory response syndrome, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr, mast cell activation syndrome, histamine intolerances, depression, anxiety, CPTSD. The fight or flight response at this point was just off the charts. I couldn't even plan a phone call. The insomnia was horrific. I was never completely awake, but never really asleep. I was very underweight, filled with parasites. It just goes on and on. It's like it happened to somebody else in some ways. So when I think back, I don't always remember in one go everything that I was dealing with then. The one light during this period was I would sometimes go to my piano, which was not very far away, and I would just hunch over it like this, where it didn't take any muscle, didn't take any effort on my part, or minimal, and I would just write music, and I'd write from my heart and soul. I'd write through all the pain, and I would write transformation, and I would write healing. And sometimes it would be with a baritone ukulele lying on my back in bed when I couldn't even get to the piano. But I wrote these songs, and I dreamed that one day I'd be able to share them with people. So when I was at the worst of it, which lasted for a few years, I kept reminding myself, I want to give these songs to the world. This is what I'm here for. And I promised myself that if I ever got well, I would share those songs with the world. And I would also go and help the people, the millions of people who feel trapped and lost and abandoned and hopeless, help them find their way out of hell. I made myself that promise, and I just held to it. And eventually, by some miracle, I found / I was led to / I was given, I don't even know with some of this stuff, the tools that I needed to get well. And even after I had all the right tools in place, it still took me years to actually get out of hell. There were years where I didn't actually know if I was going to succeed, where all the evidence was pointing to, you're probably going to just get a little bit better and stay stuck. So to paint this complete picture for you, health problems that started very young and continued all the way through my 20s, through my whole life up to that point, I had no logical reason to believe it was ever going to get better, because the only evidence I had was that I was stuck and there was no way out. And even the best specialists had given up on me. And even after I started to heal, I still had that same evidence. I had the evidence that I could get a little bit better, but then I was going to stay stuck. So I had to say, no, I don't believe that. I am choosing the reality where I get well. Some part of me never fully allowed myself to believe that I was sick. Some part of me remained in an alternate reality where anything was possible. And I ground it out day after day. I continued to just show up and inch along. And eventually, I found my way out. And all that's to say nothing about the challenges I had with relationships, with money, with being my authentic self, living out my purpose versus just trying and failing and trying and failing and feeling stuck. There were so many other challenges that went along with this, and I had to do this just as a whole, all at once, the really, really hard way. The feeling of having health and confidence and strength and flow and opportunities after all those years and all that hell that I went through, it's truly indescribable. And life is very good. I get to do things I could have only dreamed of before. I've climbed a mountain. I've played on stage in front of big audiences. I have a wonderful, wonderful partner who is just a delight. She's a wonderful woman. And I get to help people every day to rise out of their own challenges. So my message for you today is, if you are feeling lost, trapped, hopeless, whether that's from a health challenge or another life circumstance, I'm here to help. My journey has led me into every dark corner that you can imagine. In order to heal, I had to heal not just my body, but my mind, my emotions, my spirit, my masculine essence. And I had to rebuild my entire brain, my entire sense of self, my entire understanding of boundaries and authenticity from nothing. And so whatever you're dealing with, it's not too much for us to do together. I'm not scared to talk about it with you. I'm not scared by whatever you're facing. I'm here to help you walk out of the dark, however we have to do it. As long as you are alive, there's still a way forward. There's still a reason to believe. So please reach out if you want to talk. It would be my absolute honor and privilege to be able to talk with you and share more about how we can move forward together. For now, thank you for listening. It's been a blessing to share with you, and I wish you healing, peace, success in the next steps.